Hello guys, Jessica here with Minnetonka Family Chiropractic. Wanted to talk to you guys today about how to convert your favorite recipes into healthy versions. So especially walking into the holiday season, I thought it'd be important to show you guys the process that I go through to take some of my favorite recipes, which a lot of times are not the healthiest, and turn them into a healthy version of that recipe. It's really easy for us to get hung up, especially during this time of year, on not wanting to eat healthy because it doesn't taste as good. That's kind of the consensus you hear from a lot of people. So being able to take a recipe, look at it and see how can I make this better, or even like make it super healthy. It's way easier than most people would realize. And you don't need a culinary arts degree like me to be able to do this. It's just a matter of knowing where to pick your battles. Some recipes don't convert well, most of them do. But I want to show you guys what that process looks like. So I'm going to show you guys just kind of in real time. I'm actually going to take a recipe and I'm going to convert it. I've got my 3 favorites from just like kind of like holiday themed type of recipes. So the first one here, this is my favorite pie recipe of all time. It is just a crowd favorite. Everybody loves it. And if you guys are familiar with the Pioneer Woman, I actually use a lot of her recipes. They're not designed super healthy from her perspective, but I can easily take her recipes. There's nothing that I've tried so far that hasn't converted well. So taking her recipes, I'm able to make those into healthy versions. And so this one here, it's super simple. There's only a few ingredients in this one, so it makes it even easier. And it's also the kind of recipe that doesn't take a lot of doesn't have to be like super like scientifically accurate. A lot of people get really afraid of like, if I change it, will it turn out? And this is one that you can mess with this thing for days and it's not gonna make it that much different as long as you kind of stick to the principles here. So looking here, the first thing we have is unsweetened baking chocolate. There's a lot of different ways that we can do this. Chocolate is actually really good for us if it's a dark chocolate and it's organic. The number one thing that I will say whenever I'm telling people to convert recipes is focus on organic. If you do nothing else, if all I did was take all of these recipes or all these ingredients and do organic, that would be enough to make this recipe so that I wouldn't feel guilty for eating that. There's a few different steps I'm going to take beyond just that to show you how to make it even better. But number one thing, buy organic. So there's plenty of different like already pre-made like organic black or dark chocolate bars you can buy, and you can melt those down the same way you would with just like the baking chocolate squares. You can find one of those. What I like to do is I actually take 4 ounces of cocoa powder and I melt down coconut oil and I just mix them together until it's a nice consistency. And I use that for my chocolate sauce. It's the best. Equal Exchange cocoa is my favorite. They're one of the highest quality brands that I found, and they have the best tasting cocoa. Next, we have butter. So when it comes to anything dairy, you're going to notice all I do with dairy products, just make it organic. It's the easiest switch to make. It's also the number one thing that I recommend people switch. I know a lot of people think that organic is somewhat of a hoax, but that's definitely not the case. I grew up in agriculture. I lived within the realm of both organic and grass-fed and conventional agriculture systems. I've been a part of all of them. And I've seen the difference that it makes when you raise animals on organic land with organic processes, keeping the drugs and all of the medical aspects out of raising those animals and the plants. It makes a huge difference. When it comes to dairy, the reason why I say this is the biggest or the most important to switch over to organic is because dairy cows are eating GMO diets, really, really high in grains and just like unhealthy items that help them produce a lot of milk. So they have a very high toxic load, and they're also raising confinement in most cases. So you mix the healthy or the unhealthy lifestyle and diet, and now you all of a sudden need to add a lot of synthetic additives to their life to try to keep them healthy. And there's going to be a lot more antibiotic use as well. So switch it to organic and you're great to go. I love dairy. I love butter and cheese and milk. Like I use it all the time. I just make sure that it's organic every time. Sugar. Now this one here, there is a lot of different ways that we can convert sugar to a healthier version. And with this here, I always recommend staying away from white processed sugar. There is no place or time in any recipe for white processed sugar. It comes from beets in most cases, and those are genetically modified. There's no nutritional value. It is one of the most unhealthy foods that we can be eating. So simply going to an organic cane sugar is a huge step up because we're getting, cane has got more nutritional value than sugar beets. And being that it's organic, now it's not genetically modified and it's not sprayed. That would be the one step up. You can also do coconut sugar, which is a great option. You can do monk fruit. And then xylitol is another one that is a great option for using instead of sugar. The reason why we'd want to stick to a dry sugar in this recipe is because if you look at the consistency of this pie, the reason we get this is because we're whipping all of these together, and then when we chill it, that butter is going to harden and it's going to make it so it's a really nice creamy content. It gets really soft when it's outside the fridge. So looking at a recipe like this, we don't want to use something like honey or maple syrup, because chilling honey and maple syrup really doesn't change the consistency. Maple syrup being the one that is the one that doesn't change at all. Honey does get a little bit thicker, but we would have some separation between the butter and the sugar if we were going to convert that to like a liquid type of sugar. So sticking to any one of those is a great option for that. The other thing is cutting down the sugar like amount is huge. So when you're starting this process off, if you are somebody who has a massive sweet tooth and has a hard time eating things that aren't sweet, simply cutting it down by a little bit is going to help you. I recommend in this recipe starting off with doing just a cup of sugar. I mean, you can, if you need to go less than that and just cut out little bits at a time, it's going to start that process. But as we start to eat healthier, our body is going to change. We're not going to be craving sugar as much. And you're going to notice you can keep cutting sugar back in a lot of recipes. The reason why it got so big is because when we're eating nutritionally void food, the sugar adds so much flavor to that our bodies just get used to craving that. And we actually end up like increasing our tolerance to how much sugar we can have. When I go back to eat a recipe that is fully loaded with sugar, it's like that, like drippy, like, ugh, kind of, I can't even do it. It's too sweet. So for me, I've gotten to the point where I'm actually cutting this one down at least in half. So doing more like three quarters of a cup of sugar. You can even go a little bit less than that. Every time I make it, I cut out a little bit more sugar, and it's delicious each time. So just cutting that back, it's not going to change the consistency that much, because the main aspect of this pie is going to be whipping that butter to get that nice consistency. The sweetness is there to just kind of offset the bitterness of the chocolate. So then moving on here, again, I always recommend organic. Vanilla would be the least important thing out of this whole recipe to make organic, just because it's such a little amount in there. But anytime you can do organic, please do. It is the best way to ensure a healthy diet. Now, when it comes to eggs, I should say free range. So when it comes to eggs, they are one of the most confusing items that I found to purchase, because labeling on these is so misleading. When it comes to chickens, in most cases, and just a conventional system, they're raised in a really tight barn with a really crappy diet, and they're not able to get out and stretch their legs. They're really not living like chickens. They're in a dark building away from the sun. Everything that would produce an unhealthy chicken ultimately leads to unhealthy eggs. So the number one way to ensure quality is to go to a local farmer who's raising organic, pasture-raised chickens, getting eggs right from them. That's the number one thing that I would do. But when you're looking at labels in the store, if you get pasture-raised, it's going to be way better than free range. It simply means that they're not in cages in that barn. They're still cramped, they're still confined, they're still in a dark building, but they can walk around over top of each other, basically. If they say outdoor access, they don't even need enough outdoor access for the whole flock to be able to get out there. They can have just a small little pen outside, so there is access to it. It doesn't actually change the fact that these are still in confinement, still very super unhealthy. You'll see no antibiotics ever. That's a really popular labeling on eggs. That is really misleading as well, because they can actually, and in most cases do, inject antibiotics into the egg before the chicken is born. That way, as they're growing, they do have that antibiotic load already. But because the chicken hadn't hatched yet, they're claiming that it's no antibiotics ever. And unfortunately, chickens, I mean, they're only around for about 3 months from birth to when they're butchered. And in that time, all they need is that one dose of antibiotics to really damage their health. They really don't have enough time to detox from that, especially with the diets that they're eating. So focusing on organic and pasture raised, if you can get it from a farm, definitely do that. Now, when it comes to the pie shell, this is something that there's a few different ways that you can change this. I highly recommend if you can switch it altogether. I don't even do a pie shell. I do, it's medjool dates and nuts, and I just stick it in the food processor, blend it down. It's going to get to be kind of just like a nice, like sticky texture. I just line the inside of my pie shell or pie pan with that and put my filling in. you can get an organic pie shell, or you can make your own, and just focusing on finding the organic ingredients for that as well. And then you have a pie that now we've cut down the sugar intake, we've changed the toxic ingredients into healthy versions. Now, even though this is still a sugar dessert, you're able to eat this without any guilt. Obviously, don't overdo it. We don't ever want to eat way too much sugar, but this is something that I don't feel guilty about eating this pie at all. I make it anytime that I have a holiday event. So then moving on here, the next thing is stuffing. So stuffing is got to be one of my favorite food items from the Thanksgiving table. So I am somebody who I've tried a lot of different versions, especially when I first started eating healthy. I just went out and looked for looked for healthy recipes. And a lot of times I was really disappointed with how they tasted. They were dry. The gluten-free versions were kind of just like, I don't know, they didn't do it for me. Not like they were bad, they just didn't live up to the expectation. So instead of doing that, now I just take my own recipes and I convert it into the healthy versions. So again, we have our butter. We're going to make that organic. And we have the French bread on here. Now, I don't know why they had to specify day old. You can dry down your own bread. I actually make mine the day of. I make my own homemade bread, and then I just toast it in the oven and get it so it's nice and crispy. You don't have to worry about the specifics on that. Just making sure that your bread is toasted or dried. So what I would do to switch this out is I would do a sourdough or sprouted grain type of bread. Oops, and I did not spell that right. All right, so sprouted sourdough. When I make my own, this is something that not everybody is comfortable making their own homemade bread. You can very easily just buy a good sourdough or sprouted grain. Doing that, it's gonna be the same. You're gonna get the same 1 pound, processed the same way. It's not gonna be any different on that, just making sure that it's nice and toasted. For me, what I like to do, I have a honey oat bread that I make. And actually, so our family raises their own grain. So we actually have a grain mill at our house, which is really cool. So I get to use organic grain right from our farm. But focusing on whole grain, organic is huge when it comes to small grains. So you got your barley, your wheat, your oats, all of those types of grains. When it says non-GMO on the label, that's very misleading because none of those items are genetically modified crop. There is no genetic modification that happens to the seeds. So you can spray that crop all you want and still have the non-GMO label on that. And that's one of the things that makes it really difficult because a lot of people think that, oh, it's non-GMO, it must be healthy. So just knowing that about grains, what happens a lot of times in grain production for these small grains is in order to harvest it, the farmer will actually go through and they'll spray a load of glyphosate on the field to basically as a desiccant to dry that down. And then now they can harvest everything at the same dryness. It takes a lot of the work out of processing that and making sure that it's at the right maturity. So grains are incredibly important to have organic. That is hugely important. So the next step here with the sourdough, the reason why I recommend this, when we ferment grain, it actually breaks down some of that acid in the grains that make it hard to digest. So it's a lot easier on the digestive system, and you can actually get more nutrients out of it by doing that. It's kind of like a pre-digestion that happens by fermentation. Most sourdoughs you see on the shelf are kind of a fake version of that. Actually, I went to culinary school. We made it by just adding in fermented potato water to give it that sourdough flavor, but we didn't actually ferment the grain. So focusing on getting an actual authentic sourdough, like Italian style bread, that's the way you want to go. Same thing with sprouting. When we sprout grain, we're breaking down some of that acid. We're opening it up so that our bodies can access the nutrients easier, and it's way easier to digest. So those are the reasons why I would recommend doing that. If you guys have any questions on bread making, let me know. That is one of the things that I love making the most. I love making bread. It's so fun. So come talk to me if you have any questions on that. And then moving on here, the rest of this recipe is so easy because all we have to do is focus on organic. I'm not even going to write it out on all this because we just organic onion, organic celery, same thing with the herbs. It is more important, in my opinion, to make the butter and the bread organic than it is the herbs, simply because of the quantity that you're using in the recipe. So let's say you don't do this whole thing organic, start with the butter and the grain and work your way down from there. I am going to talk about the chicken broth here. There's a few different ways that you can do this. I like to make my own chicken broth. And again, that would come from you just like cooking down bones, making like an authentic chicken broth. So taking the chicken bones, cooking that for 24 hours with some acid. So I do like some apple cider vinegar, and then I'll also do some different seasonings in there, and it just cooking all that really good collagen and amino acids from those bones. If you want to buy an organic like chicken broth or chicken stock, just making sure obviously organic is the way to go. The thing that I started doing recently is I actually get chicken feet. I know that it seems a little bit gross at first, but the chicken feet, if once they're processed down and like deskinned, if you cook those down the same way that you would just like a regular chicken broth, it is the best flavor. It is so full of collagen, so full of amino acids. It is the best chicken broth I've ever tried in my life. Takes a little bit to get over it. Like if you're kind of weirded out by weird foods like that, don't even worry about it. But if you're somebody who really wants the best chicken broth, go find yourself some organic chicken feet, make your own broth. It's amazing. And then again, we're gonna go with organic eggs. And so with this recipe, you're not cooking this any differently. You're going to process it the same way. And that's what makes it so nice. Some recipes, if you changed it to a healthy version, there is a little bit of like cooking difference that you're going to have. But in this case, all these recipes, you're going to cook them the same way. And that's why most recipes are they're really easy to convert. It's just quality of ingredients and cutting down some of those undesired foods. The next one I have here is a rosemary cream sauce chicken. Now, this is something super popular around the holiday season. And the reason why I like looking at this one is because a lot of people are afraid of cream sauce because dairy has such a bad rap. So this one, so easy to convert. All we have to do, we're going to focus on organic chicken. And then we got our butter. We're going to make sure that's organic. Those are the two most important switches, along with the cream, obviously, being that that's dairy. I do want to talk about the olive oil for a second here. So if you look down in the recipe on this one, we're going to be putting the olive oil in the skillet to fry the food. Now, I never recommend cooking with olive oil. It is something that it is so healthy for you. You want extra virgin unrefined olive oil, but doing that in recipes you don't have to cook or are very lightly heated, because cooking process on that actually makes the oil rancid. We don't want to heat olive oil. So I actually use coconut oil. And there's a lot of people who say that they don't like the taste of coconut, so it scares them to use coconut oil in a recipe like this. Unless if you're really, really sensitive to the flavor of it, you're not going to even notice that there's a coconut flavor. And it actually pairs really well, just like the gentle flavor of coconut oil. It pairs really well with chicken dishes without actually changing the flavor to taste like coconut. Another one is avocado. It's another great oil. That's one that you can heat without it going bad. So focusing on those tubes, not both, or avocado oil. That'd be a great way to convert that. The cream, the chicken broth, we want that organic as well. With garlic. So you can use granulated garlic, just like a dried down version of this. If it's 2 cloves, I would recommend doing about 1 teaspoon of granulated garlic. I do recommend whenever there's whenever there's the opportunity to use fresh garlic, I recommend it because the flavor of it is so much better. It just got more of a robust freshness to it. So focusing on any root vegetable that we eat needs to be organic, because the soil is so important for how the food is raised. And so anything that's growing above the ground, it's pulling in some of those nutrients. But if you think about root vegetables, we got our garlic, our potatoes, our carrots, our turnips, our radishes, anything in the ground, it's sitting in that soil. So if it's super toxic, we've destroyed the soil health. Now we have the chemical residues. As it's sitting in there, it's soaking that up. So root vegetables are one of the most important vegetables to have organic because we want it to be in healthy soil. So focusing on that. And then obviously the pepper and the rosemary, that's the least important 2 items in this recipe to have organic. But whenever you can focus on that, that's going to be the way to go. So this is really how simple recipe conversion is. You don't have to worry about being so perfect and I need to be like a culinary master to convert a recipe. You really just need to focus on how can I change the quality of this recipe to make it so that it's a healthy version. And if you guys have any recipes that you're really concerned about, one that you think that isn't going to turn out if you just switch out some different ingredients, let me know. I love to help people walk through recipes. So you can send them to me. If you have one that you just want to put in the comment section, if you got a website for it, I can actually help walk through some of those too. So I love helping people learn that cooking is not as scary as it seems, and eating healthy is simply a matter of understanding why the quality is important and how to implement that into a recipe that you already love. So one thing I will say, as you go through this journey, when it comes to converting recipes, you will have some that don't turn out. And that's something you just kind of have to accept in this process. It's the same thing as like just trying a new recipe. Sometimes they just don't work well. So focus on changing the quality, being open to trying new things, and be okay with failure sometimes, because it doesn't always work out the way that you want it to. I've had some that I thought I had it figured out and it just completely flopped. So give yourself some grace on that, but it's really fun once you start plugging into paying attention to the recipes and how can I change this? How can I make it better? You'll start to feel really like a chef in the kitchen and really empowered in how to eat healthy. So let me know if you guys have any questions on recipe conversion. If you have any specific ingredients you don't know how to substitute, I can help you out with that. I'm also going to be putting a link in the description of this video that is going to have, it's one of my favorite doctors talking about the impact that chemical farming has had on our food system and why organic is so important. I want you guys to understand that, because that is the #1 thing that I recommend for setting yourself up for a healthy lifestyle, focusing on organic. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. Thanks for joining me.